this has nothing to do with who you are as a person. It's about the decision that you made. And you didn't make this decision because you're a bad person. You made the decision to watch pornography because you didn't have the skills or the tools or the know-how to break that pattern. Not having knowledge is very different than being a bad person. Sometimes I'll ask guys that I work with, just to really try to drive this home, because this is such important work here. I'll ask them, if you knew exactly how to overcome this pattern and how to break it for good, would you? And everybody, of course, says, well, yeah, if I knew how to not do this anymore, of course, I wouldn't go back. And I say, well, that tells me it's not that you don't care. It's not that you're a bad person. You just don't have the knowledge yet. You don't know what to do to make it so this doesn't keep happening. That it's not about the person, it's about their knowledge. It's not about who they are. It's about a situation or a decision or a lack of a skill or something that's not them.
Today on the Unhooked podcast, I'm joined by Sam Tielemans, a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 15 years of experience helping men break free from pornography addiction and rebuild emotional intimacy in their relationships. Sam is the founder of a therapy clinic in Las Vegas and the host of the Couples Healing from Pornography Addiction podcast. What I really appreciate about Sam's work is that he doesn't rely on surface level tactics or willpower hacks. Instead, he helps men get to the root cause of their compulsive behavior, addressing the deeper emotional pain that drives it. Whether it's shame, loneliness, or stress, Sam's approach is about healing from the inside out. In this episode, you'll learn how to identify and heal the real reasons behind your urges, what it means to work with the first domino instead of chasing symptoms, the 3 types of urges and how to work with each of them, how to approach accountability and support in a way that builds long-term change, and why true freedom means not needing porn, not just avoiding it. If you're tired of white-knuckling your way through recovery and want real, lasting transformation, this conversation is for you. And if you're ready to take that next step and get support on your journey, check out my coaching program at unhookedacademy.com. Unhooked Academy is where we help high-achieving men break free from compulsive porn use and build lives of integrity, discipline, and fulfillment. All right, without further ado, here is my conversation with Sam Tielemans. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Unhooked podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lipkowitz. Today, joined by a new guest, Sam Tielemans, who I'm very excited to have on the show. Sam, how are you doing today?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to the chance to speaking today.
Yeah, I got a recommendation from a previous guest, Jeff Stura, to bring you on. And, I started checking out your work, very kind of impressed by your approach to porn addiction recovery and your experience in this. You've been working in this field for over 15 years. And so I wanted to make sure we brought you on and talked about kind of the methods you use to help people, not just helping people overcome the addiction, but also helping couples work on their relationship and rebuild trust. I'm wondering if you could start just by sharing a little bit about your journey, like what led you into this line of work, because it is a pretty unique line of work.
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate that. So for me, I was in grad school and becoming a therapist. I had a really good friend open up and share with me that he was struggling with pornography addiction. And he had tried everything that somebody offered as like groups, put filters on your phone, therapy, couples therapy, like accountability. He literally did everything he could possibly do to try to overcome this, but he was still struggling. And so I remember when we were chatting, I just had that like a really clear thought that I needed to learn how to treat this because I'm sure I was going to see it a lot. So that kind of motivated me to say, okay, well, he knew more than the professors did at the time because he'd been doing his personal work for like 7 years. So he became my mentor and he kind of shared with me, this is kind of how this works and this is what we're looking for. This is how we work with it. And so that kind of got me jump started on this path of how can we help people who are struggling with this, not only just personally, but their relationship as well. So it has led to this whole thing where, yeah, I have my own podcast now, and I love working with people, individuals, couples. I like to offer as much help as I possibly can, because there are so many good things that people can do to overcome this.
Mm.
And there's so many tools that people can implement to help heal their relationship. And so, yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been a joy to have a chance to work with so many people along the way. It all just got started in grad school with my friend saying he didn't know how to overcome this.
Yeah. Have you had any experience with whether it's porn addiction or just kind of addiction in general or compulsive relationship towards things? The reason I ask is that I find that often the people who are best at supporting others are those who have some connection to it themselves in terms of the ability to be empathetic and compassionate and understanding. And I'm curious, just like, where do you go into yourself to understand that feeling?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I live in Las Vegas, and as a kid, you're curious. So I'm exposed, I was exposed to it as a kid. I never personally struggled with it on like any addiction kind of a level. I remember hearing somebody say one time though, well, let me take a step back, because it's so helpful to understand that, as your guests know, as you talk about in your podcast, this is just a coping mechanism for people. So it's all about identifying what's underneath that. And so I remember hearing somebody say, you either go towards perfection or towards addiction. And so I went more towards perfection, where I had to kind of put on this, like I've got everything all figured out. And I tried as best as I could to be and appear perfect, because underlying that was like this sense of shame of, if I made these mistakes or if I did the wrong thing, then I'm bad. So that was like this, oh, I gotta like go to the total opposite side of this now, and make sure that I do everything properly, everything perfectly. So while I didn't struggle with the behavior of coping with pornography, I can definitely relate to the shame that underlies that,
Mm,
that often drives that in people.
yeah, I guess that shame and the coping mechanism for you kind of came out as perfectionism, I guess, needing
Yeah.
to be perfect
Yep.
in every way, and that was your coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
remember again hearing another quote that I thought was great. This person said that perfection isn't about having a high standard for yourself. Perfection is self-protection. And when I heard her say that, I'm like, that absolutely rings true for me. It was, if I'm perfect, then I'm good. If I'm perfect, I'll be accepted. Which again, everybody needs. Everybody needs acceptance and approval and to feel like we're enough. We just find people find different ways of trying to get that need met. So whether it's perfection or addiction or performance or whatever it is, it's so much of this overlaps.
How does addiction get that need met, that need for acceptance? Because I can understand how perfection, like perfectionism and saying, okay, I need to be perfect in everyone's eyes, can give us the sense that, okay, if I do this, people will accept me. How does addiction kind of get that need met as well?
I think because it's a counterfeit and it doesn't actually work, it's a part of what keeps people stuck. Where if they feel like they're not enough, if they feel like they're not being accepted, there's inherent pain in that. In fact, there's a researcher who I love. She talked about how rejection and physical pain are processed in the same part of the brain. So she said whether you step on a nail or your loved one turns away from you, it's the brain doesn't tell the difference. And so if we don't feel accepted, we feel a heaviness there, there's a sadness, there's loneliness. So I don't think addiction is turning to addiction doesn't get that need met, obviously. I think it's the escape from not having it met. And
Mm,
people just get looped into that because it feels like an escape for a bit. Then they come back to reality where they're not enough in their mind. So then they need to get out of that. And then it just starts to become more and more entrenched.
yeah. And it's so wild how universal that is. That, you know, every individual that I've seen going through this, there is that underlying sense of shame of not being good enough and wanting to escape that feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a universal human experience because we all need connection. So
Mm.
if we don't get it, we feel bad, and then sometimes we tell ourselves that it's us. Like, so and so doesn't want to be close to me, or I don't feel like I fit in anywhere. It must be because I'm a loser, or I'm a failure, I'm not enough. Which then I think kickstarts that cycle.
Yeah. You emphasize in your work getting to the root cause of porn addiction or porn use. What does that mean?
So my philosophy, my methodology is that I like to think about it in terms of like a set of dominoes. where the very first domino is the root cause. It's the thing that you're trying to escape, whether it's shame, loneliness, fear, rejection. It can be boredom sometimes. There's an initial thing that kickstarts the domino chain. So once that happens and you feel bad or you're left out or you're stressed and you just feel like you're failing and falling behind, when somebody starts to feel that, that first domino gets knocked over, which then triggers the next one, which is that's when there's curiosity or the urge shows up. The urge is like this signal that the brain sends to start to get you out of this cycle of feeling bad. So you feel bad, then you start to get curious, or there's an opportunity and you're alone. And so as you're alone, you think, well, maybe I'll check out Instagram for just a little bit. And you scroll, and a part of you is wondering if you're going to see something, and then something catches your eye, and slowly you go down this path, right? So there's all these dominoes of curiosity. Then you justify it and rationalize it. And then the very last domino is when you're actively searching for something or acting out. And so what I find is that a lot of men unintentionally are spending most of their time trying to prop up that last domino. So they think, I'm in the middle of this. I feel this intensity. I feel this urge. Therefore, I should, fill in the blank with a tool. I should call an accountability partner. I should go on a walk. I should put my phone down. And there's nothing wrong with those things. But if you're already in that cycle, the first domino has already fallen. So a lot of times guys are just playing catch up. And that's a part of what makes them feel so hopeless is that they're actually trying. They're trying as best as they can to keep that last domino up. But the problem is that's not where the issue is. It's not like the slip or the acting out. It's not the problem. It happened 5 dominoes earlier, sometimes a couple of days earlier, when they got into a fight with their wife, let's say, or they made a mistake at work and they feel like they're, failing, and whatever that initial thing is, then, sometimes hours or days go by where that just kind of stews and eventually turns into this urge. So my whole
Mm,
philosophy is that identifying that first domino, whatever that is, the shame, the fear, the low self-worth, and working on that is how you actually break the cycle instead of using tools to combat urges, which doesn't address that underlying level.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important. The kind of the metaphor I like to give to people is like it's putting a bandage on internal bleeding. It's like if you're just addressing the outer, superficial, external, the symptom, you never actually address the underlying reason of why this thing is happening in the first place. You might get some temporary relief, but that issue is going to continue to pop up and be there. And that's why you have to go to that root cause, that first domino.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And if that's what makes people feel so bad is that unintentionally they're just working on the wrong level. Not because they don't care, it's not because they're not trying, it's just the tools that they have received up to this point. It is the bandage. It is
Mm,
well, when I'm struggling, then I should do this thing. Whereas, just kind of like what we're both talking about, if you're struggling, that means something's already happened internally that needs attention.
Would you
And
say that final domino, the bandage in this metaphor or the final domino, is that important? Is there benefit to accountability and, getting a streak going and all this, or is it just more important to focus on the original domino and let the rest heal itself?
it's a good question. So I definitely think there's a place for both. I think having healthy habits, accountability, in my opinion, accountability that's not so focused on did you slip or not, but helping you stay accountable to these new routines that you want to create. Where it's like, if your goal that week is to make sure you're getting enough sleep and you're eating healthy and you're doing your whatever the emotional work is that you're trying to do, it's, hey, did you do that stuff? It's a lot of times people use accountability as like, I better call my person so I don't slip. And I think, sure, there's a place for that too, because we want to avoid that as, as much as we can, especially if you're married, because it has a huge impact in your relationship. So I definitely think there's a place for that. And I think doing the underlying work will then ultimately take care of the urges so that you don't really experience them in the same way anymore.
Mm. Is there anything you wish more people knew about accountability? I mean, you touched on it a little bit there, but accountability is It's a phrase we hear a lot in
Yeah.
recovery. And, what else do you think people need to know about the right kind of accountability? Because that's what I'm really hearing is that there's different variations of how accountability can be used, and some of it's more helpful than others.
Yeah, I think that's the core of it for me anyway, is if you have somebody who can be there to support your goals, who can hold you accountable and help you to work through any blocks that might be getting in the way of you reaching the goal. I like the accountability goal centered in terms of healthy habits, routines, skills that you're trying to learn. It's you becoming a better version of you instead of, again, I think there's a place for this too. It's like when you're struggling, yes, having a support network and a community is so helpful. And I think there's a balance between those two. When you're triggered, when you are struggling, yeah, you have to do something, right? You still have to deal with the trigger if you're in it. I think reaching out to somebody can be really, really helpful for that. In my opinion, so much of this personal work happens outside of those moments because in
Mm,
the moment, you're basically trying to just get through it. But a lot of times, if people don't know what to do next, like the next day, it's like, oh, okay, I avoided that. I didn't fall back into this pattern. I'm good. That's where I think the work takes place is now that you're not actively in a trigger, you reflect on what caused that. Where did
mhm,
that come from? What drove that? And then you put things in place to address that so that when that scenario happens again, you will experience it differently.
mhm.
Do you know what I mean? I'm happy to share
Yeah.
examples too, but
No,
I
no,
think this
totally.
work happens outside of
Yeah,
that.
I think that's a great reframing that, a lot of times when you're in those moments where you're triggered, there's not a lot of work you can do because you're in that
Right.
triggered, activated state and you don't
Yeah.
have really access to a lot of your resources. And so you
Yep.
have to rely on these times outside of it to say, okay, when I fall into this trance of addiction and craving, I know I'm not going to be, my best self. And so how can I set myself up for as much success before and after so that I have
Yes.
these external supports that when I go into the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment, I always forget which one's the
Yeah, I
monster.
can't remember either.
But it's like when I go into that moment, it's like, how can I make sure that I cause as little damage as possible? And then when I come out of it, how do I learn from that experience?
Yeah, and I think those 2 pieces together are how people can actually get out of the pattern. It's I wanna plan for when something happens, and then I wanna figure out what causes it to happen in the first place.
Mm,
So for some people, it's shame. They just feel bad about themselves. I guess we've touched on it already, right? The rejection, the stress, the overwhelm, all of that stuff doesn't stress doesn't ever go away. We can do such good work around that because a lot of times stress will trigger somebody's feeling of not being enough or a failure. So if you learn how to reprocess stress in this example so that it doesn't trigger this feeling of I'm failing, then you can have a stressful day, but not turn to addiction anymore because you're not in this intense pain. It's just stress that then you learn how to cope with and deal in a different way. So yeah, I think those two things in tandem is when this happens, what do I do? And then what leads me down this path? What gets triggered what's that first domino so that I can target and work through that outside of the moment as well. Yeah, people have success with that.
yeah. You mentioned one of the benefits of accountability is, having someone in your corner who can help you work through blockages. One of the blockages that comes up often for guys is limiting beliefs or just belief systems in general about who they are and what they're capable of and what they think that they need. And there's kind of this belief system that's in place that might be holding them back or limiting them in some way. How do you work with limiting beliefs?
That's some of my favorite work, honestly, because I personally have experienced how truly transformational and life changing it is to go from feeling shame to not having it anymore. And so for me, when I work with somebody who's so hard on themselves and they do have these limiting beliefs about, again, whether it's not being enough or being worthless, or I'm happy to share an example just to kind of illustrate the principle. But the principle, the idea is that we've got to externalize the problem away from who I am and into the situation. In other words, shame is when we take it personally. let's say my wife and I get into a fight. When she's mad, if I take it personally and tell myself I'm a bad husband, look, my wife is sad. Look at what the decisions have caused. I did these decisions. She's hurting. I'm a bad person. That's somebody taking it personally, which is shame, right? It's the sense of I'm bad. Brene Brown talks about this difference between guilt and shame. So Brene Brown talks about how shame is when it's focused on yourself. Guilt is when it's focused on your decision or your
Mhm,
action, which
mhm,
isn't who you are. So if I get into a fight with my wife and she brings up the past and tells me, I can't believe you did this and you never loved me, so many men will sink into this like, oh, I'm a terrible person. So when I work with people to help them unravel these beliefs, so let's say in this example, husband says, wife is mad, I'm bad. I really want to first help them to identify the fact that they're taking it personally when the wife is upset by the actions. This has nothing to do with who you are as a person. It's about the decision that you made. And you didn't make this decision because you're a bad person. You made the decision to watch pornography because you didn't have the skills or the tools or the know how to break that pattern. Not having knowledge is very different than being a bad person. Sometimes I'll ask guys that I work with just to really try to drive this home because this is such important work here. I'll ask them if you knew exactly how to overcome this pattern and how to break it for good, would you? And everybody, of course, says, well, yeah, if I knew how to not do this anymore, of course, I wouldn't go back. And I say, well, that tells me it's not that you don't care. It's not that you're a bad person. You just don't have the knowledge yet. You don't know what to do to make it so this doesn't keep happening. So just right there, we externalize it. It's not about the person, it's about their knowledge. And we can learn new things. You're not bad because you don't know a skill yet. So that is a big part of what I find that helps to break this false belief of shame and not being enough is externalizing the problem. It's not about who they are. It's about a situation or a decision or a lack of a skill or
mhm.
something that's not them. That it's so helpful when somebody can internalize that.
Yeah, I love that example of that the question that you ask guys of, if you had the knowledge and the skills to overcome this, would you? And it's like, yeah, of course. And I think
Of
I've
course.
seen that also really helpful for partners of people who are struggling, to recognize that, hey, these guys who are struggling with this, they don't want to struggle with this. Like probably one of their deepest desires is to be free from this thing. And they hate the fact that they're acting out and watching porn against their own will. And so I think just having that also just leads to a lot of compassion for the person, as well as self-compassion when you recognize, yeah, if I could overcome this, of course I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Um, one retort that I hear often from guys when talking about this overcoming limiting beliefs, overcoming toxic shame, as you mentioned, it's not about who you are, it's about the decision or the action. But the kind of rebuttal to that I hear sometimes is, yeah, sure, but I keep making these decisions and there's so much evidence, that I am incapable because I've been trying for years and years and years. What if this is who I am? If somebody
Yeah,
comes back with that, then yeah, how do you
yeah,
then
I hear the same one. I'm with you. That's
yeah.
exactly what people say is it's like, well, it is me. I'm making the choice. I've been
Mm,
doing this forever. So the response that I have to that is, have you learned the skill that you need to solve the problem? And most of the time people say, no, I keep trying. This is why I like framing it in this like domino analogy. Most of the time, men have been trying for decades to prop up the last domino.
mm,
So they think, oh, it must be me. I keep going back to it. When really,
mhm.
if you zoom all the way back out, it's like, well, do you know how to solve the first one? Do you know why you're even struggling? And half the time they say no.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you don't know why you're struggling, it's like literally you're shooting a bow and arrow into a dark room, hoping that that shot hits the target. So if somebody
Mm,
says, it's me, I've been doing this forever, it's like, yeah, you have been. And you probably just don't have the skill yet to number one, figure out why you're here, and number two, to solve that issue. And when you do, then the whole thing changes.
yeah. I love the the imagery of that because it's just such a helpful representation to give a guy and say, like, if you're still struggling, clearly you're not at the initial domino. There's
Yes,
if you're struggling, maybe you're at the third domino, fourth domino, wherever. There's still some hidden dominoes upstream that haven't yet been addressed. Because
that's it.
if you address those earlier dominoes, like once you get to that original one, you know, that's where your freedom lies.
That's exactly right. Because I think, and I just think a lot of guys don't know how to do that. They don't even know what to look for. They don't know what's involved with that,
What is
which,
involved with that? I mean, let's get
yeah,
practical
good
here.
question.
Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah. I'm
does
happy
that
to.
look like?
So I think I try to make it as like so as simple as humanly possible because a lot of people feel really confused and overwhelmed, and there's so many possible paths to work through this. So people get overwhelmed. They don't really know what to do. So I'm a big analogy person. I'll share with you one more analogy. I think in order to overcome this, instead of somebody trying to resist their urges, we can actually use them in the healing process because I think that urges are just messengers. They contain valuable information about why you feel them. So I like to use the analogy of like a dashboard on your car, and if the check engine light goes off, I'm not a car person. Like I literally changed my own oil for the first time when I was 30. I'm 39 right now. So I changed it last year, like 38 years old. I know nothing about cars. I'm the kind of person that when the car light flips on, I want to put like a piece of tape over it and hope that it goes away as I just drive. I think a lot of men feel similar with this. They don't know what to do when they feel an urge. They think urge is enemy, therefore push it away, which is the duct tape on the dash. But if you took it to a mechanic and you're like, hey, what does this light mean? And you're like, oh, that's the radiator, or that's the oil light, or hey, that's the gas light. That just means you need gas in your car. If you knew how to identify what the urge was trying to tell you, what it was trying to get your attention on so that you can address, if you knew how to identify that, then solving it becomes very easy. So let's use this example again of let's say shame, right? We'll use a few different examples to hopefully illustrate this. So let's say somebody is just so hard on themselves and they feel like they're not enough. What I like to do is if you feel an urge, you trace that back to where is this coming from? Are you trying to escape? There's a few different threads that we can open up here. Let me add one thing to this. Hopefully it doesn't get too confusing. I really like to use this framework because a lot of times when you ask, okay, what's the root of this issue? Men will say, I don't know. So I like to use this framework where there's three different containers for urges in terms of the check engine light. Like, what's it trying to tell you? Where is this coming from? The first type of urge is you're trying to cope with something. So some kind of a negative feeling. The second urge is habit. The third one is just a normal physical drive. As human beings, we're sexual creatures, so we just have those natural impulses that aren't related at all to addiction. And so, whenever somebody feels an urge, this is how you can start to do this check engine light analogy. You feel an urge, and then you try to trace that back to where is this coming from? And having three categories I've found can be really helpful for people to use as a framework. Because if you have no reference, you're just like, I don't know where this is coming from. But if you start with, okay, is there any feeling that's overwhelming me right now? Am I feeling down about something? Am I anxious or worried? Am I being hard on myself? You can do a quick mental or emotional scan internally and think, yeah, I feel like I am kind of overwhelmed because I'm falling behind at work. This urge is trying to help me forget about that. Once you pinpoint that to it's me trying to cope, now it's telling you what needs attention. Well, that means you need to make sure that you're addressing that work project and getting that done. And if you don't know how, then that means you might just need to ask somebody, or you might need to learn a new skill, or you might need to ask for more time. But you trace this big picture urge down to something so concrete that then you can solve, then the urge goes away. So whether that's coping or habit or physical urge, there's tools for each category. A lot of times men will use habit level tools to deal with emotional level
Mm,
urges,
mm,
and it just doesn't work. That's why
mm.
they think it must be me. Like, I'm trying all this stuff. I have this routine in place. I've got my accountability person. I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm still struggling. They're usually just not mapping the right tool to the right route. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I like this distinction of these three buckets. There's the coping, dealing with something uncomfortable, some difficult emotion. There's the habits, just the kind of the momentum of the autopilot nature of the mind. And then there's physiological, kind of natural processes of, oh, I'm
Yep.
hungry, I'm
Yes, that's
I'm
right.
aroused, I'm
Yep.
sleepy. Um, and it makes sense, especially if we dive into that first bucket, if you're aware, hey, there's something unpleasant going on that I'm trying to escape, if there's something that I'm stressed about. And, I like that you highlighted earlier, like it could just be boredom. A lot of guys don't realize boredom is an unpleasant experience that they don't know how
Yep.
to deal with. Um, so obviously there are tools for that, addressing what's going on, practicing compassion, practicing acceptance. When it comes to the habit bucket, I think this is almost trickier to work with because there isn't something to really pinpoint. So, what are the tools if somebody recognizes, hey, there's really nothing that I'm kind of avoiding right now? This is just like the momentum of some habit I've had for the past 20 years, and there's nothing painful driving it that I'm trying to escape. What are the tools for working with that one?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think all of these intertwine, and sometimes it is just on the habit level, or the habit level needs attention as well as the emotional level. So let's say somebody is just, 10 p.m. rolls around and they crawl into bed, they grab their phone. They're not planning on doing anything, but just being on Instagram, let's say, and then they're scrolling and then they do see a provocative image. Just that alone can get the dopamine flowing because it's like, oh, like this was, this image stuck out to me, or it's a revealing image or whatever. It can get your mind going in that direction, which can then, if you have that momentum from the autopilot, I like how you put that. That's exactly right. And it just feeds right back into it. So
Mm,
if somebody is struggling on a habit level, then we want to figure out, okay, when does this happen? 10 p.m. I pick up my phone. Okay, so what would you what would you rather do? What how would you rather wind down at night instead of picking up your phone? And then that person might say, "Well, I'd rather read a book for 10 minutes." So then ahead of time, again, so much of this is outside of the moment, then it's like, okay, if you know this is kind of the common trap and you don't want to be doing this anymore, so let's restructure your 10 p.m. your wind down routine. So at 9:30, maybe you do plug your phone into the other room. But again, the caveat is like you plug it into the other room to support your new routine. It's not, I got to plug my phone into the other room because I'm going to mess up, right? It's like all this is driving towards how you want to be. So phone
mhm,
goes in the other room so you can get a good night's sleep. Phone goes into the room so you can be at peace and wind your system down. So it's linked to some positive thing. So it goes in the room and then you have a book on your nightstand and then you read for 15 minutes and the light goes off. That new routine becomes the tool to combat that particular moment in time of the 10 p.m. So it's
mhm,
just you're tailoring your new routine or how you'd rather be in that moment depending on when and what's happening in the situation.
mm. And then how do you work with that third bucket? I mean, if it's just a physiological, and let's, since we're talking about porn addiction, lust or kind of sexual desire is a kind of natural thing that comes up
Yep.
from time, just being horny. So
Yep.
what do you do? First of all, how do you identify, oh, this is just a natural moment of me being aroused? And then what do you do with it if you're able to identify this isn't escapism, this isn't my 10 p.m. nightly routine, this is actually just a genuine moment of arousal? How do you work with that then?
Yeah, it's which I again, that's why I think the categories can be so helpful because I think you had a good question. How do you figure out if that's what's driving it? Having three categories you can reflect on and do a quick scan. It's like emotionally, how am I doing today? Like, no, today was a great day. Habit is just like a part of my typical pattern. Not really. Then, okay, I just feel this arousal. So I think you can kind of by process of elimination, land on, yeah, this is just, it's been a while, or I saw an image that was attractive and it reminded me. Because sometimes you can just be watching a show, or like we talked about earlier, scrolling Instagram, and you not thinking about anything that has to do with sexuality in any way, but you see an image that reminds you. So that happens too. And we're exposed to this external stimuli, which can then, it's like, oh yeah, that, I do feel that. And that might kind of start that feeling of desire or arousal. So if you do this scan and you reflect on, yeah, this is just a normal feeling, then one of the best ways to handle that is a lot of people refer to it as like mindfulness or meditation or just awareness, where you just kind of allow that feeling to just, you acknowledge it and then you allow it to pass. I think so often what happens is that men have, they're exposed to an image, or they see an image, or a thought pops into their mind, or however it gets there. What often happens is that men will give that thought oxygen. And the more you think about it, the more your body will respond to that and generate more of those feelings. So I like to encourage people, instead of trying to kick that thought out, we want to just acknowledge, how does it feel in your body? What do you notice? What's there? And you just allow that feeling to pass without feeding it more and more of your attention. So it's more just kind of mindfulness type of work.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting is, as you mentioned earlier, there's such an interplay between all three of these buckets, and also the kind of the skillful responses to each of these three buckets. And I personally find that mindfulness is the quickest and most effective way to deal with all of these buckets. I mean, if you're having a strong negative emotion, if, sadness is coming up, using some mindfulness there and, acknowledging that emotion and saying, oh, okay, this is sadness and that's what's happening. And let me allow this emotion to be here and pass through me, rather than resisting it or trying to,
Yeah.
dive into it. Mindfulness can really be the antidote to that, that frantic running away and trying to escape the emotion. Learning how to actually make space for that emotion. Same with the kind of momentum, or just the habit bucket. Recognizing, oh, okay, what's going on here? What's my routine? Oh, it's 10 p.m. I'm noticing this. That takes mindfulness too. So I really see mindfulness as this. If I mean, obviously, I'm biased. I spend
I
time.
agree with you
You know,
100% though. I like what you're
yeah,
saying.
it's
Yep.
really kind of foundational, I think, for a lot of these things.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah,
Just one last little note on that, because I think that's so true. And having the ability, because doing this emotional scan to try to figure out what's happening here, yeah, that is a part of the process of trying to understand and allow or make space for whatever's going on, not judging it. So I'm glad you're bringing that up. It really does apply to all three buckets. And I'll encourage the clients that I work with to start developing that skill. The small percentage of people who take me up on that, they just talk about how it's life changing for them. So I'm glad that you talk about that on your podcast, because that is such a powerful tool. A lot of people, they sleep on that because they think like mindfulness, I don't know what that is. I don't know what it means. And I'm too busy. My mind is too active. They have these reasons why they don't do it. But
yeah,
the ones who do, it's so, so powerful.
yeah. I have one client who, we've been working together for a couple of years, and he also attends like our weekly group calls with the community that I run, and he always talks about how I kind of tricked him into it, and he thought we were going to be working
Yeah.
together around porn addiction and all this stuff, and how over time he started getting into this mindfulness stuff and just realized how powerful of a tool and how transformative it is for every aspect of your life. Not just addiction, but
Yes.
emotional intelligence, having a healthy relationship with others, as also with yourself. I mean, just mindfulness is such an incredible tool for personal development. And as you say, a lot of people do sleep on it because it seems
Yep.
like this little, well, what's, sit and watch my breath for 10
Yeah,
minutes a day.
exactly.
What's the point? But it really, it can give you tools of self-awareness and impulse control and acceptance and compassion. Yeah, and working with the mind is so important because that's where the addiction,
That's
it's
it. Yeah.
all It's all in
Yeah.
the mind, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's in the body as well, but the body-mind connection, it's
Yeah,
working with the mind and learning because a lot of it, as you say, a lot of it is a coping mechanism for dealing with difficult, unpleasant emotions that we don't want to be with. And mindfulness is, I've found the most powerful way of learning how to be with an unpleasant emotion.
for
Because
sure.
as you say, you're not distracting yourself from it. You're not trying to, wash it over with some pleasant emotion. You're just learning how to
Yeah.
be with it.
I think that's, I mean, the fact that you talk about that's a core part of your philosophy. I think so many people benefit from that, even if they're not struggling with like the addiction, let's say, just you developing as a person. It's all inner work. And that's a pivotal foundational tool to help people do that.
Yeah. What's something that you believe about porn addiction recovery that might go against the mainstream narrative or might be kind of a unique perspective?
I think that a lot of people believe that this is something they have to deal with forever.
Mhm.
This is like a once an addict, always an addict kind of a thing that they just think they need to learn how to more effectively manage their triggers. I think kind of like what we've talked about today, if you can address the root domino, you won't have triggers anymore. You can like I worked with a guy one time and after a couple of months of us figuring, okay, where is this coming from? Doing all the work that we talked about today. And he said after a few months, he's like, the fact that I don't slip anymore, I don't even feel like it's a win because this is just how it is now. Like I don't struggle anymore. I'm not trying to stay away from urges and temptations. I just don't feel them in the same way. And as we talked about earlier, if you frame it as urges are messengers that are trying to get your attention, it's the check engine light. So once you figure out what under the hood needs your attention and you give it such, the light turns off. If you fill up your gas tank and it's full, the gas light goes off by itself. Urges will go away that are driven by needing to escape. Physiological, sexual, healthy drives, of course, those don't go away. But those types of urges that fuel escape go away because you process things differently. So I think a lot of people feel discouraged and think this is just my lot in life that I have to learn how to live with this. But my confidence in the fact that this doesn't have to be the case is like so strong after having seen so many people work through this where they don't have to struggle anymore once they figure out why it's happening in the first place.
I think that's such an important message of hope and also not just hope, but also, as you say, like a lot of people aren't even aware that that's a possibility. A lot of people are stuck in this paradigm that, okay, I'm always an addict and this is going to be a fight for the rest of my life. And I just have to sit here and kind of block out the
Yes.
temptations and kind of like, what's that? There's the biblical kind of like character who has to kind of like hold these pillars in
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
forget his name.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Samson was doing that with the pillars. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. And it's just like
Yeah.
this, okay, I have to live in this battle for the rest of my life. But the real goal of recovery, the ultimate goal is that inner freedom where your life is free from the craving and the addiction, not a life of never ending struggle and inner turmoil. It's like to have that inner freedom where you don't even think about acting out because it's just not who you are.
That's
That's
right.
really the goal we're going for. And that kind of coming for full circle, it requires us to go to the root cause, to
Yes.
address that first domino.
Yeah, without that, like you said, the goal isn't to just not fall into temptation. The goal is to feel relaxed and confident and calm and free. And so doing this inner work is, I think, how you get there. And once you do, and you develop some skills around this, and of course, life is tough sometimes, and we are going to have stressful moments and days, and we are going to get our feelings hurt sometimes. But through the stuff that we've been talking about, like you talked about mindfulness and the different tools and learning new skills, you can navigate all that stuff with confidence,
Mhm.
knowing that a relapse is not around the corner because you've you've got things dialed in.
Yeah. If someone is listening to this right now and they are stuck, they feel stuck, they feel like they've been trying and trying and trying, and they're just kind of depressed or feel hopeless, what would you say to that person who's listening?
Yeah, I feel for the person who is in that spot because so many are. I hope that as we've talked, they've maybe gotten another way to consider that it's not who they are, it's where they are on the path that's a result of maybe just a missing skill or a lack of awareness or understanding or not knowing what's driving this. So if somebody's stuck and they're like, I don't really don't know what to do, I think starting by maybe using this framework to first identify where are the urges coming from. If you're stuck, you don't know how to solve this, that is a really good first step. Where are they coming from? What are they trying to let you know? Is it coping? Is it just habit? Is it physical drive? Once you have a direction to walk in, if you think it's coping, I just feel lonely a lot, that starts to give you clarity about what you need. Loneliness, then you need connection. So you brought up, and you have a community and you work with people. I think that's so for people to reach out to you and say, if I'm feeling disconnected and lonely, you've got resources to help support them in that. Community is key. So you're just mapping that across. I'm lonely, therefore connection is the resolution to that. Or I'm being so hard on myself, then you map that to self compassion. So I think somebody who feels hopeless, that's a really good first place to start is just try to understand where is it coming from and then take one small step towards resolving that. And then you can start to find relief along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, really, it's like being a scientist, being very kind of
Yes.
approaching this, from this very rational place of, okay, what is the cause of this? What is going on in my system that is making me behave this way? And if I can address what the underlying need is that's making me behave in this way, then I can figure out how to give myself what I need in a healthy way.
And that's the key right there. And that's why I'd really hope that people can feel that this is much more of a simple process than maybe they've felt.
Mm.
Sometimes when I tell people this idea that like, oh, you don't have to struggle with urges forever, they're like, oh, that sounds like magic. And I quickly respond, oh, it's not. And that's a good thing because magic is like this lucky, oh, hopefully I'm the one that lightning strikes and I don't have this problem. The reality is this is really, it's predictable. You can actively do something about it. You can change this. You don't need magic. It's just getting the skills to start to identify, work through, resolve whatever's driving it. I hope that that brings hope to people who feel like they're stuck.
I'm sure. Well, I have a feeling that this episode is going to bring a lot of hope to people because I think
Hope.
that message is so important, that it is possible to create a life that you don't have to struggle with. I mean, there's this quote that I love. I see it in the sobriety circles, kind of the alcohol recovery
Mhm.
circles, that the goal isn't to be sober. The goal is to create a life so amazing you don't want to escape from it. And that's what it's
Yeah, I like.
about. It's like the goal is not that you never act out with porn or look at an image, a seductive image in the future. The goal is that you create a life so amazing that you don't need to escape or run away or self sabotage. That's the goal.
I think it's perfect because yeah, it's all about fulfillment. You want to enjoy your life. You want to enjoy your relationships. So as you learn how to do that, the need to run away from not having that goes away by itself.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I'm going to consider this as part one of our interview because I had planned to ask you all kinds of questions about healing relationships and all that stuff. But I figure much better, let's just bring you back on and have an
Sure.
episode dedicated to that. So, final question for you today. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to learn about your podcast or the work you do? Where should they go?
So the best place for people to find out about just my material and philosophy and tools, it's my podcast. It's called Couples Healing from Pornography Addiction. And so I talk about things from both a husband's perspective, a wife's perspective, how do you help individual progress as well as the relationship progress. So that'd probably be the best place for people to find me.
Amazing. Well, we will link all that in the show notes as well as your website and everything else. And we'll definitely get you back on soon for part 2 where we can talk about what to do if you're in relationship. I think that's a really valuable topic as well. So it's been great having you on, Sam. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, we'll see you soon. And that's it for today, folks. We will catch you guys on the next episode of the Unhooked podcast.